You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and I am joined this week by a very special guest. He doesn't really need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He is the general manager of Lost Island Theme Park in Waterloo, Iowa. Please welcome to the Coaster101 podcast, Eric Bertch. Eric, welcome to Coaster101.com. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So I wanted to get you on, and there was a little bit of playful feedback on Twitter between the drunk riders and us and you, and they said, hey, let's get him on the podcast. And as we typically do, we try to either play first or second fiddle to those guys. Don't know if you've been on their show yet, but
yeah.
Okay, well, I've beat him to the punch. This is great. Fantastic. But you are you're the general manager of Lost Island Theme Park, which just celebrated its first anniversary. So you're well into year 2 at this point. But for those who might not know the name Eric Bertch, I know you've been a long time Lost Island native. Can you tell me a little bit kind of about your career and how you got started at Lost Island?
I can. The condensed version is that our family decided to bring a water park to Waterloo, Iowa back in the late 90s. And we were able to successfully bring a world-class attraction to the middle of the cornfields. And that was just a way of bringing that level of entertainment to an area of the country that is underserved. And especially for our neighbors that at the time, many of them did not get an opportunity to visit places like Disney World or Atlantis in the Bahamas. And we were trying to bring that opportunity a little closer to home. Fast forward 20 years, and we decided that we had kind of plateaued on the attendance possibilities for just the water park and felt that we needed to expand the tourism offerings, and kicked around a number of different ideas, but ultimately landed on the theme park as the kind of go big or go home decision. And here we are.
I love it. Well, I'm going to assume then from the family nature that you are Waterloo, Iowa natives, or at least close to it, because with no offense to Iowa and the cornfields, it doesn't to me seem like the place you would one would typically travel for a water park. But it seems like you guys have, successfully, carved your niche in that part of the country.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the concept that's really foreign to a lot of people is realizing that the purpose of this facility, the water park, was never to make money. It was purely to utilize our good fortune and resources to bring an amenity to our own community. And all we were asking was that it would be able to survive on its own. So the investment in the water park will likely never be recovered. It was just trying to build something that was self-sustaining for our community. And yes, we've been able to gain the popularity from the facility and have people from all over the country coming to visit us. It's still definitely not an investment that most people would make. And the same is true for the theme park. It was another opportunity for us to show people on the coasts that Iowa isn't just a flyover state. But again, it was bringing entertainment to people who may not know it exists.
Understood. And so when you're kicking around the kind of the concept and the ideation of that next step for the Lost Island, again, as you mentioned, you came up with several ideas, ended up on a theme park. Unfortunately, the timing for opening, the little thing called COVID just kind of torpedoed a lot of things, I imagine. What kind of did COVID, what role did it play in the park's development? I mean, obviously you couldn't open as soon as you wanted to, but was there anything else that we're not really thinking of when it comes to, the planning and the sourcing? And I know the supply chain issues were, running rampant and still are, but is there anything when you were coming up with a concept that kind of COVID got in the way of?
Well, the biggest thing, and you kind of touched on it already, Andrew, was just the cost overages from the supply chain issues, and then also we had a derecho here in Iowa in 2021. So just as we were crawling out of COVID, uh, all of the plywood in the Midwest was getting used for restoration and uh, basically rebuilding many of the buildings in Cedar Rapids, a town just south of us an hour, because of this catastrophic windstorm that blew through. And that was happening right about the time that we were trying to frame up all of our buildings. And so the price of a lot of items really spiraled out of control. And we were so far along in the building process that there really wasn't any way to get away from that.
Hmm.
And so long term, COVID had very little to do with us in terms of construction progress. It was more we couldn't open all the rides in year one because we were waiting on parts to be delivered. And then the cost overages really shortened our runway in terms of what we would be able to do next. At the water park, we were able to, first of all, open with all rides in year one, and the project was able to cash flow in year one. This project, because we did not know when we were going to be able to fully open and basically had to kick the contractors out the gate the day before we finally said, that's it, we're opening with what we have. Uh, Not all the rides were ready. And that then ultimately caused issues with being able to market it successfully, because you can't really say, coming this summer, someday. Uh, Needing a firm opening date really handicapped our ability to let people know. And then the messaging that all of our, well, not all, many people took from the marketing we did do was, oh, they're not even, they shouldn't be open. They're not ready to open. We'll try it maybe next year.
Hmm.
And so it was kind of a perfect storm of a lot of things that led to where we are. The biggest disappointment was just that everything ended up costing almost 50% more than we had projected. And
Wow.
so, since this is a privately funded enterprise, we we lost a lot of the leftover funds that would have been used for some new attraction or big project after year two.
Hmm.
That's getting pushed off because we are still actively losing money.
Got it. Well, the key, and I think again, there's been a lot of good coverage of the park, especially this season. You know, now that those roller coasters and the attractions are open, obviously Volcano, it won the Golden Ticket Award for best new attraction, right?
It also won the brass ring for best new
Brass,
attraction.
perfect. So you've got some key pieces here, but I want to talk a little bit, kind of going back to again the ideation and creation of the park. You guys are doing something that not a lot of other regional parks are successful with, and you've kind of created your own IP. You've got these five realms, and each realm has a couple of characters. They're walk around characters in the parks. What was the kind of the thought process in creation? I mean, obviously, it's licensing is, as I can imagine, is probably prohibitively expensive. So how did the kind of the creation and ideation of this IP and these five themed realms and the characters within them, how did that kind of come to fruition?
That's a really good question, Andrew. And again, I'll try to summarize because this is
Yeah.
where I tend to ramble. But the whole
We
reason,
love rambling. So if you want to ramble, feel free.
all right, uh, the very first idea for the park was to essentially expand the Lost Island Water Park world, which is just ruins and a fun environment to be in. And the more research that we did into the amusement park space, the more we realized that the clientele at an amusement park is much different than at a water park. And just creating a fun environment to be in isn't necessarily going to keep them coming back because they're there for the rides. where water park people, many of those season pass holders, will maybe ride one slide a day. The rest of their time is reading a book on a lounge chair or getting a tan, or maybe they just want to stand in the wave pool, get a drink, and then leave. So, since amusement park riders or visitors are much more likely to come in for the attractions and then get out, there has to be another reason to bring them back or keep them. And what we found is that in straight amusement parks that are only concerned with the tallest, fastest, longest roller coasters, that's what a lot of the season pass holders do. They buy the pass so that they can come in for 5 minutes, ride that coaster, and then jet out. They don't spend any additional money, and that was just not a business model that was going to work for us because of where we're located. We have to have repeat traffic, and so we started out with just the idea of creating these 5 different lost civilizations and playing off of existing legends in real history. So Atlantis, there's a Zealandia down in the South Pacific. There's another one up in China that's the lost continent of Mu. And then there's one near India. And then legend up in the northwest of the United States about Lemuria. And so we thought, okay, maybe we could do that, and that's how we'll create our Islands of Adventure kind of park layout. And the more that we started digging into a lot of those, besides Atlantis, the rest of them have either not much or some really inappropriate background. So we had to table that idea because we definitely didn't want to bring in those real life bad bad reputation to our park. And it was at that point where we said, okay, well, we're going to just have to make this up ourselves, because we didn't want to be concerned with cultural appropriation if we were to say this is Fiji and this is Hawaii or something, because we are already sort of riding the line like with that over at the water park. And especially if we were planning to do characters, which was ultimately part of the plan, we just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be offending anyone, but also creating a world that would make people want to return. And so we spent a lot of time at the drawing board and eventually sort of threw up our hands and said, we'll just do the elements. It's easy. It's not, nobody can claim that we're stealing from anybody else. But then, of course, the Avatar, The Last Airbender, which did not even occur to us, came up immediately in people's comments. And then also James Cameron's Avatar seems to be stealing quite a bit of our source material as well, which is odd because we don't know James Cameron, and he sure seems to be doing a lot of the same things that we are. So that was really how we landed on the different elements. And then from there, it was just a matter of working with our designer on, okay, how do we make these unique so that it's not the exact replica of Avatar: The Last Airbender or anything else that has used the elements in cinema and television or the gaming community, making it so that it was different enough that it would draw people back and want to learn more about it. So we spent about 5 years developing kind of the metadata that helped inform our design decisions, because like you said, we've essentially created our own IP, and the difference between ours and Harry Potter or any of the Disney movies is the only place that it exists is in our heads. So in order to communicate that to the guests, we have to make sure that our the design decisions and the names that we chose for the rides and the color scheme and everything matched this IP that we are creating, so that eventually, when we get to the point where people do get invested in the world and want to learn more, it's not you know glommed on modules that just got added after the fact, kind of not to dig some of the other parks in the region, but they make an attempt at theming one ride that has nothing to do with the rest of their park, and that's counter to how we wanted ours to be presented to the guests. It's one experience with different aspects that should appeal to different visitors.
Understood. I love it. That's some really good like inside baseball there. It's like you mentioned these characters were in kind of development, creating the metadata in the background for 5 years. Is that about the same timeline that Lost Island theme park has been in kind of the works, or is it much longer than that?
Yeah, we started kicking the idea around in 2011 when our neighbor to the south made the decision to get into our backyard by adding a full-blown water park to their facility. So we had no intention of creating competition that close to home, and made that very clear when we built the water park. We called them and said, hey, just so you know, we're going to be building this place. Don't have any interest in roller coasters, so you keep your roller coaster deal going and we won't have any trouble. And so that really was the impetus, is that when they sort of fired the first shot, we thought, well, I guess we'll see what happens if we jump into your backyard and see how you like it.
I love it. I love it. And it's, Iowa is a big state. There's a lot of distance to cover. There's definitely different audiences there for sure. But kind of when you're envisioning this park and you're, starting to kind of blueprint and come up with ideas, did you have ideas in mind? You're like, okay, we want this, badass dark ride from Sally Dark Rides that's heavily themed, or we want a launch roller coaster, or was it more so here's what's available, here's what we can afford? How much of that was we want this exact thing and it happened, kind of like a volcano, versus something like the Madugani launch coaster, which happened to go up for close in 2016 and before coming over?
It was a combination of both. So the roller coasters, we knew we were going to have to get used, just because for the budget to create the experience that we wanted, there was no way we were going to be able to afford them. So something that I did not know, because this doesn't really exist in the water park world, the secondary market for amusement rides is actually pretty robust. And so we had placeholders in the locations where we were going to be putting rides. And really all we did was, again, we can credit our neighbors to the south with this, but the ride mix that we chose was based on attractions that were missing from their park. And so we knew that we wanted some kind of a suspended coaster, and we knew that the other one needed to be something unusual. And we had talked about putting in a wooden coaster, because my father is a huge wooden coaster fan. However, when we found out what the maintenance routine has to be on those rides, we decided that probably for our first installation, we would stay away from that. And we were fortunate enough to have the Leesburg coaster pop up, and we happened to be at IAPA the year that it went up for sale, and had already been talking to the broker that sold it about a number of other potential ride possibilities. And he came to us and said, you are the first ones I'm telling about this, but this coaster is going to be sold as soon as it becomes public. So I wanted you to have first right of refusal, basically, and so we were very fortunate to lock in Matugani. Um, and then the rest of the ride mix, like I said, our Gerschlauer Skyfly was something that is missing from the park south of us that we definitely felt needed to be represented here. There are only, I think there's only one other one in the Midwest. Um, so that's a very unique ride. We put in an interlink super flume because uh, the again, it's a popular park staple, and
Mm-hmm.
we knew that the one at our neighbor's park was getting older, and we're very happy to hear that they were shutting it down in 2021. But then, due to our fire that took out the ride queue building in March of 2022, it wasn't able to open in time, and so they have since replaced their log flume, and now that unfortunately didn't get to be a ride that we had that they didn't. Although ours is you can sit two in a seat instead of in line.
There you go. I'm,
Uh,
I'm I'm loving this friendly competition so much. It is fantastic. It seems friendly. I mean, it feels friendly, right? Friendly
well,
en- friendly enough.
it's friendly from our side. I mean, since they've sold out to a corporate
Mm-hmm.
monstrosity, we don't really know the people that own it anymore. So
Okay.
yeah, we were friendly with the Krantz family, and there was a lot of ribbing that went on during the summers when we just had the water park. Since they sold it right when the theme park was going to open, I don't really know how they feel about uh, this park so much, but um, I do
Gotcha.
think that it will force them to do a little bit more than they would have otherwise.
I would agree. I want to talk some of the highlight rides at Lost Island theme park, and I'll start with the dark ride I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I'm someone who loves an interactive Sally dark ride. Obviously, they're the best in the business when it comes to the dark ride technology. But how did, again, going back to this, creating this unique IP that exists nowhere else? How was Volcano kind of presented between the two? Did you guys go to Sally and say, we have this idea for this dark ride in this volcano? Was Sally like, hey, we have this idea, we can do this? How did Volcano come to be?
Well, again, it happened at IAPA, the convention for amusement parks. We had been enamored with Sally since they put out Tutankhamun, and just had followed them. I mean, their booth every year always had a different animatronic figure that blew you away, and you whether it was with Justice League or um,
They had Big Bird there one year, Sesame
yeah,
Street.
yeah. So I mean, every time we would just stop by and have a conversation with them prior to the park getting started, and it was in one of those very early years where we were thinking that maybe we would do this, that they had a concept for a Forbidden Island dark ride, and uh, we said, this is right up our alley if we ever had somewhere to put it. And that was kind of the first discussion back in maybe 2008. And they would have that in a glass case every year because it never got picked up. And when we decided, yes, we're going to go ahead with the theme park, they were the first people that we went to because we feel the same way you do, and said, Sally Dark Ride is going to be the focal point of the park. It's going to be what everybody's talking about. And so we knew it was going to be going in our fire realm. And so we said, okay, we like the Forbidden Island concept, but we want to strip it away and just focus on the volcano, which was the climax of that ride anyhow. And then it was just a matter of working with their design team on integrating our backstory with their existing technology, and we they're a great team to work with. I mean, they were Drew Hunter is one of the most gracious, uh, creative minds that I've ever met, and he helped us design the logo for the park. He helped flush out the story and figured out, well, this scene doesn't really work right. We're going to change it out and put in this instead. We had different gaming elements that we thought about doing in the dark ride that ultimately got changed, and we ended up with the scoring system that we have now with some thermal equalizer blasters. And so just designing the whole thing from the pre-show through, there's a score that was created just for this ride as well. Is truly a unique dark ride that you cannot find anywhere else because it's all based on our ideas.
Right.
So,
And this is, again, this is all third party accounts at this point, but everything I've seen online is that Volcano is the quality of dark ride that you would see at a place like Disney or Universal. It is a step above that classic regional park. With no offense to my home park of Carowinds or any of the Cedar Fair parks with the Boo Blasters, this is not that. It is steps, leaps and bounds above. So I'm very excited. I'm planning to be out there in a couple of weeks. That will be one of the first stops I make. So I'm very excited. But again, we are a roller coaster podcast, and at Lost Island, you do have 3 roller coasters. And what can you tell us about Madugani, which was the former Canadan at Leesburg?
so Montugani was our problem child last year. We were dealing with some issues with motor parts that were not available, and so this is its first year open. It's an Intamin launch coaster. It's got a hydraulic launch system to it, so it shoots you out of the station at 47 miles an hour in under 2 seconds. And they're, oh, now I can't remember. It's like a 50-foot tall top hat that goes into two other inversions. You have a heart roll and a traditional loop in there as well. So it's a short ride, but it's a phenomenal experience. I mean, it's very smooth and definitely the best coaster in the park. I would say it's the best coaster in the region. Um, but yeah, that ride has been hands down everyone's favorite. We also have a reclaimed Vekoma suspended looping coaster, Napuko. That was originally down in Ratanga Junction, South Africa. So both coasters got totally refurbished. We gave them a new paint job and replaced most of the parts that needed to be replaced. With the Vekoma in particular, we replaced the existing trains with the M3s, the newest restraint systems, and did everything we could to smooth out the ride. There's still one problem spot that we asked Vekoma to fix, and they were unable to do so before we opened. So that ride is much smoother than most other SLCs, but I would encourage people that prefer a smoother ride to sit in the back of the train, and you will have far fewer issues than if you want to be in the front row.
The things that we love to hear as coaster enthusiasts are insider tips like this, and also the phrase "smooth SLC." So
Yeah.
you are preaching to the choir on that one, my friend. So, and then the other coaster that you guys have is it is the only what I'm going to call a non-reclaimed coaster. You've got Locolo, right?
Yes, Locolo is a wacky worm that we fixed his face. The traditional wacky worm was a little bit out of nightmare fuel for me, So we toned him down, and he looks like a much more friendly caterpillar.
I love it.
But it's a traditional wacky worm that goes into our kids section of the park.
Perfect. Now, as again, coaster enthusiasts, we will seek those guys out very quickly. Creepy face or no creepy face. Um, Outside of the roller coasters and Volcano, though, you've got it looks like a pretty robust selection of flat rides throughout the park.
Yeah, we have a Gerstlauer Skyfly. There's an SNS shot and drop that we reclaimed from out in Henderson, Nevada. It used to be on Wild Bill's rooftop casino. Uh, that was actually a prototype, and that's sort of an inside joke as well because it is located in our Udara realm, which is inhabited by inventors and kind of quirky steampunk folks. And the themed queue for the drop tower is talking about how you are basically going to be test dummies for this technology that we're hoping will be able to launch you back up into the sky so that they can rebuild their floating city. So, and it doesn't work quite the way it's supposed to. So it's we're glad that it was a prototype so that it sort of fits that story. Again, not anything that any visitor needs to know, but just something that we can chuckle about.
Okay.
Then we hit all the nostalgic rides. We have a Ferris wheel, teacup ride, a mini Himalaya, and then a Zero Flying Fish, just trying to hit all of the classic amusement park rides. And then, like we were talking about earlier, the Interlink Super Flume is a double drop log flume like ride, again with a themed queue that tells people a little bit more of the story about that realm. And then we have a wide variety of children's rides in their own realm. So a number of rides from SBF, Visa, and Zamperla that are geared towards people under 48 inches.
Got it. And most of the flats were they new or were outside of the drop and drop shot SNS tower? Were they all new, or were some of them reclaimed as well?
The flat rides were almost all new. So the drop tower, our Ferris wheel. Yeah, those are the only two. Those
Okay.
two and the two coasters. Everything else was new. We
I
also
love it.
have two rides by Moser, Maverick and a Sidewinder, and then a Zamperla disco coaster.
Perfect. Again, for a smaller brand new park in Iowa, this is quite the ride lineup. It is it's definitely, to me, is a destination park, and part of the reason why I want to come out there so bad. So, but again, one of the other things I'm hearing is that the staff at the park is top notch, friendly, courteous, exactly what you want in a theme park staff. I mean, can you talk a little bit kind of about your staff? I mean, are they? I know some parks they kind of pull from an older demographic. Some parks pull from a younger demographic. What's your secret to having such a successful and friendly staff?
I think, well, like most businesses, it starts from the top. So if we, from the beginning, have made it very clear that the whole reason for this park is to create a fun experience for the people that visit, and we're exhibiting that, it does make a difference. Now, I can tell you from 23 years ago when we opened the water park, there's also something to be said for a new, exciting place to work. And so that has a lot to do with it as well. People in this area are generally very friendly and welcoming to visitors because we really don't get that many. So when people come, especially from out of state, it's a big deal, and the staff are excited to know that you came from wherever, Pennsylvania, Oregon, North Carolina, to come visit Iowa. So that's just kind of the personality of the residents that live in this part of the country. But I would say that we our staff mix is about 50-50, really, the
Mhm.
traditional under 25 crowd and then over 50. And we have great things to say about both those groups. Um, the one area that not all parks our size uh, dip into is the J1 visa international workers,
Mhm.
because we noticed very early on last year that coming up with the necessary staff to operate this place was going to be challenging. Um, because again, I think COVID had an impact on the number of people that are willing to work at all. And especially a seasonal job is less desirable than it used to be. And so we tapped into the J1 program, and they also, feed off of what their coworkers are like and are generally just happy to be in the United States as well. And so having that mix of three different groups of people that are all excited to be in this space is contagious. Everybody feeds off of everyone else. So as long as we don't have too many people in leadership that are wandering around with a grumpy face on, I think we can maintain this for at least the next couple of years until the newness wears off. And then that's when it gets challenging, is maintaining that level of high guest service.
Well, I'm looking at you right now on the Zencaster where we're recording. I'm not seeing a grumpy face, so it
Not yet.
truly not yet. Okay, well, if this interview goes any longer, it might be. I don't know. We'll see. Um, Last year on our podcast, we had the Weber Group on, and I know they did a lot of the theming here. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of theming inside Lost Island? And kind of obviously we've seen their work at parks around the country. They did the sign at Carowinds for Copperhead Strike, which is my home park. We did a feature on Coaster101. So if you're listening, go check that out. But working with a company like Weber Group, who can kind of build anything and do anything, was did that make theming the park that much easier, knowing you had a capable hands to build it? And kind of what was the importance of theming? Because again, you can just build a park, throw a roller coaster in a parking lot, call it a day. But you were truly immersed into these 5 realms. So how important was that for you?
Well, it's more important than the rides. As I said, for us, coming from the water park industry, uh, we our rule of thumb when we started out, we took a lot of cues from Disney, and one of their rules of thumb was that you spend $4 in theming for every dollar you spend on an attraction, and we really took that to heart when we started the water park, and even more so over here because, as I said, we aren't able to build the tallest, fastest, longest coaster right out of the gate, or we could have, and then that would have been the only thing here. What we can do is spend a little bit more time trying to create a space and develop it in a way that makes people want to come back. Because, again, I may really like roller coasters, but I'm probably not going to come back and ride that same roller coaster every day the whole summer. But if I like hanging out there and I have good interactions with the staff and the characters that walk around, or there's new things to find if I go out and am just paying attention to my surroundings, then that might get them to return.
I love what you're saying about the theming and the importance. I think it is, again, more parks kind of need to take that 4-to-1 philosophy. But part of the theming and the overall atmosphere of any amusement park around the country is the food. And I know there's a handful of restaurants at Lost Island. You've got a bar, and there's a certain subset of theme park fan who appreciates a good adult beverage here and there. You guys have your own looks like your own local brewed. It's called the Islandology Tropical Blonde. But what are some of the popular and your favorite food and beverage items at Lost Island?
Well, the Tropical Blonde is definitely something you'll have to check out. It's a beer that we had brewed specially for the park, and the brewery has since put it out into distribution because it was popular enough in the tap room for them that they're able to make some money on it, which is good. Uh, but we have several local partnerships with other vendors to try to bring those interesting, unique options to the park. The other big one is there's a local cupcake bakery called Scratch that created a 6 mini cupcake flight that represents all 5 of the realms, and then Volcano has his own to round out the 6. But each of those flavors is a unique flavor that you can only get here, and they're pretty wild. There's a blueberry coconut, a mango tagine, a blood orange buttercream, dark chocolate matcha, blue raspberry lemon, and the hazelnut dark chocolate. So they're pretty amazing. Definitely something you will need more than one person to eat, unless you're really in for a sugar overload. And then we have a partnership with Fat Cup Coffee here too to get nitro coffee on tap when you come to visit. Mm-hmm. As far as other unique items that we have, we've got a coconut shrimp basket with mango habanero sauce that you can get. We have a black bean burger that is less popular than I wish it was around here. People in Iowa love their beef, and so not too many of those get sold, but it is available and they are good. And what else? Well, we have a huge pork tenderloin, as is typical in Iowa. There's a pineapple, bacon pineapple burger, and
it's not your typical theme park fare for sure.
Well, we have pizza and regular cheeseburgers and the regular stuff that you would find, but yeah, we try to make a few items that are a little bit outside the norm, just because we have to eat it too, and we'd like to have something other than a cheeseburger every day.
I love it.
The last dessert that I'll point out, two. We serve pineapple Dole Whip here, which some people are like coaster enthusiasts about that stuff. They will travel hundreds of miles for that. So we have pineapple Dole Whip at both the water park and the theme park. And we also have a fun dessert near Volcano that is a donut volcano. So we build a pyramid out of mini donuts and then cover it in chocolate and strawberry sauce.
Ooh. Now you're my language.
Cool video or cool Instagram shot. We're not quite baking our own Disney, pastries yet, but we'll get there.
One day. I love it. Well, I know, obviously, again, we've entered year 2 as of about 2 weeks ago, and there is probably a multi-year plan, and whatever you're comfortable telling me. I mean, I'm not looking to break the news, not looking to leak anything, but let me talk to Eric personally. What's on your personal wish list for the park?
Well, Andrew, my biggest wish is that our carousel that we were supposed to have installed last year and is still being completed as we speak will eventually get delivered so that we can put it in the empty pavilion that has been waiting for it since 2021. We get questions about that from time to time, and it's just a sore subject because there's no reason that it isn't here. But I mean, we have done everything we can, and the people that are refurbishing it just have no sense of time management or honesty. They'll tell us one thing and they'll say, yep, we'll be done with this thing in a month. And we call them a month later because they very rarely will reach out to us about anything. And a month later, it's as if we haven't even had that conversation. And now it's 2 months. And you're
Oh,
like, you already had 1 month. What did you do with that time? So that's our big 2024 reveal, is that a ride that should have been in operation for year one will hopefully, fingers crossed, be here in year three. It all of the photos that we've seen definitely look like it will be worth the wait. The artistry is incredible. I will give them props on that, but in terms of delivery, fulfilling promises, an F minus. So
okay. You heard it here first on the Coaster 101 podcast. New for 2024 at Lost Island, the carousel from 2021. But
yes,
between you and me and those listening, we know you're not the only park in the industry who's had to do something like that recently. Shout out to a park down in Texas and their water coaster.
yep,
Anyway,
yep.
anyway, but beyond 2024, is there anything that you're just kind of like, you've got this twinkle in your eye about, that you would just, your dream, um maybe let's say an attraction from another park, because I don't need to know what you're ordering or what's been talked about, but if you could add one attraction in the future to Lost Island, what would you personally like to add?
Well, this is pie in the sky if we happen to hit 250,000 guests in the near future. But I mean, we have plans, but those are all ultimately based on if we can see attendance figures rise.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the one thing that I would say we would like to do sooner than later is another dark ride attraction, because we are trying to lean into the theme park description rather than an amusement park. And working with Sally again on something is definitely what we would aspire to. But given the price tag on another custom only available at Lost Island dark ride,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a little while unless we see some major increases in attendance.
I love it. I understood. But for those who are, less familiar with the geography of the Midwest, what's the best course of action to get there? If you're flying into an airport, is it Des Moines? Is it another airport? Where should we fly into to
Sure.
get to Waterloo?
So, depending on your home airport, the two closest airports are Cedar Rapids, which is a 45-minute drive, or you can fly into Waterloo if you fly on American. It connects in Chicago, and you get right in. You're 15 minutes from the park. Um, you can certainly fly into Des Moines. That's a 2-hour drive. So, depending on your tolerance for driving after flight and the price of your ticket, that might be your best option. The other thing that you have to contend with right now is if you are coming from the west, which is Des Moines, um, we are dealing with some road construction that the city decided to do right after we opened. So you can only reach us from the east, which means you have to take 218 south, and then you can get to the park no problem. But if you're coming from the west, the whole intersection that you would drive through to get to the park is closed. So you will have to turn around and drive back like 5 miles to take a side street to get to 218.
This is noted. I'm flying into Des Moines for work in a couple of weeks, and I will keep that in the back of my mind. So,
Yep. Just make sure you get onto 218 south and you'll be fine.
okay, I love it. Um, but before we wrap this up, can I get one? It is important to us as, again, fans of the industry. It's not every day we get a brand new immersive theme park built in this country. And I can count probably on less than two hands the amount of times it's happened in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years. So why is it important for coaster enthusiast, theme park enthusiast, people who love the industry, this is not necessarily a plea, but I'm giving you the opportunity to kind of tell the world, why is it important to visit Lost Island theme park and why is it so special?
Well, without sounding desperate, I mean, all parks need visitors in order to grow and continue to bring new attractions and experiences to the guests. And so, for those people out there who are saying, oh, I'll come visit in 5 years when the trees have grown up or they add in some new attractions, keep in mind that if everyone says, I'll visit in 5 years, the park may not be here in 5 years. And that's not to scare people into thinking that we're going to just close up after 2 years, but we only have a certain amount of resources. And because this is all being done in-house without any financing, the purpose of both these facilities is they need to cash flow on their own. There isn't an unlimited supply of money that is keeping them going. So if we don't see the visitors that we need, then this very unique park that we put in a lot of time and thought into may not still be around. And I mean, it's the thing about the theme park that is different from the water park is you definitely don't need to notice every little detail about the park to enjoy yourself, because many people are just coming for the rides, like I said. But for the people who do like scavenger hunts and going down rabbit holes when they visit a park, like you would see at Harry Potter or the Disney parks, where if you do a certain thing, something happens and only a few people know that it's there. We made every effort to infuse as much of that as we could. And there's just a lot more here than a collection of rides. So if that is something that you enjoy, it would be a mistake to miss out on us.
That is just a passionate, heartfelt pitch, and I'm 100% here for it. So, Eric, thank you so much for your time. If you're listening to this, make sure you head to the Lost Islands website, which is thelostisland.com. Also, Eric, before we go, I've got to touch on your Twitter account here, which is at Lost Island Chief. And there's some really good behind the scenes here, but I feel like you're a lot like me. You just kind of tweet kind of dry, kind of sarcastic musings throughout your day. I'm looking at one here. It's somebody from the water park saying you should offer deals on the weekends when I'm not working so I can come, or the kid talking about the kids who barking at your characters. This is the humor interspersed with the Lost Island news. Obviously, there is a lot of, you want people to go. You want people, there's one in here. It's like we had our first attendance day over 1,000 people. That's great. But the humor to me is hilarious. So if you're not following at Lost Island Chief on Twitter, make sure you're doing it because, again, Eric,
very kind, Andrew.
It's hilarious, and again, as someone who just appreciates the industry, and your comment here of the sign says lean back, the ride op says lean back, and you're wondering why you bumped your head. Like it's hilarious. So, Lost Island Chief on Twitter and thelostisland.com. Anything else, Eric, before we wrap this up?
I'm looking forward to your visit, and I hope everybody else wants to come out and experience the park as well.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. After you visit thelostisland.com and follow at Lost Island Chief, visit coaster101.com and follow at Coaster101 anywhere you get your social media. In a couple weeks, we'll be out at Lost Island, and we will have lots of pictures on our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We say Twitter. Twitter might not exist in a couple weeks. Who knows? But Also, if you're listening, make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, and subscribing, telling your friends to listen, because that's how this audience grows. It's just like us telling our friends in this audience is how the Lost Island audience is going to grow. Tongue twister there. But a big thanks, as always, to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music, and we will talk to you again soon. See ya.